Hey everybody, welcome to the Truly Myrtle podcast. I'm Libby and I'm sitting a little bit low in the screen, so let's just make me a bit higher. This is my weekly podcast. I beam out onto YouTube and Facebook at the same time every week down here in New Zealand, 10 o'clock Thursday morning, and it's a live podcast, so I'm going to put on my spectacles and see your comments in the chat. And I can see YouTube is here and I can see Facebook is here, and it's really nice to see you all. Hi everybody. Super wet in Otago this morning. Is it really? It is. It's grey here. It's grey and muggy. Ugh, you know, the stuff that does terrible things to your hair. Hey Barbara, nice to see you. Oh, it's so nice to see everyone. Hi Janet and Kim and Rachel. I can see you all. Hi Brenda, it's nice to see you. Wishing everyone in the US a happy Thanksgiving. Is it today? I'm not very up to date with knowing when all the things are, but I guess it is. It's a Thursday, isn't it? We never used to be aware of these things when I was growing up, but now, because of the power of the internet, we seem to be aware of all the things. And so today is Thanksgiving. So happy Thanksgiving, everyone. In fact, one of my sister-in-laws is from the States, and so no doubt they'll be celebrating Thanksgiving at their place. Okay, I was going to chat to you today about knitting top down because I put out the Baystone sweater last week, this little one here, and you have loved it, which is really nice to see. It's so exciting when I see everybody really embracing a new pattern and wanting to make it too. So it's a top down knit in the yoke. This is a beautifully easy one if you haven't tried a top down knit. And I thought we would talk about that because I read a couple of comments. There's one in particular over in the Hangout. You can join the Hangout if you want to. It's where we chat about Truly Myrtle patterns. It's on Facebook. It's just a big free group. There's 5,500 people or something in there. And it's at facebook.com/Truly Myrtle. Go and have a look over there. Join our group. I think it's groups. The word groups comes in there as well. It's a group. Anyway, someone said they'd love to knit it, but they're just feeling a bit trepidatious. Is that the right word? They're feeling some trepidation about knitting a top-down knit. And I thought, actually, you can do this. You totally can do this. And let's talk about it. Let's talk about fearless top-down knitting. What do you need? How do you get started? And I thought, seeing as you're here, you could tell me your tips as well, because then I can share those. And then we'll all, like the hive mind, will help with the advice to the people that actually want to have a bash, but have knitted for literally decades, bottom up or in pieces, and this just feels a little bit upside down and back to front and all confusing, and it does at first when you're first having a bash at it. I'll start by telling you what I've got on. It's so hot here today. It's been hot here every day, and in fact it's melting hot out here in my shed, and I was thinking I'd get a little air conditioning unit so that I didn't have another summer where I just absolutely perspired to pieces, and I haven't got round to doing it, so I'm still really hot out here. And I was trying to make a tutorial last night. My hands were sweating. It was just awful. Anyway, I'm wearing Adira. She's a little pure silk top. And she's knitted from the top. And she's a lovely little simple shape. Look, she's just a little boxy shape. This one is cropped off. And she's got little cap sleeves. And this is a pure silk. It's a nice... I can see a little end. Let me just tuck that in. She's a nice, glossy, beautiful silk. So she's ever so delicious to wear. And I have this size, which is a smaller one. And then I have another size, which is technically about 4 sizes too big for me, which is a hot pink silk. And I love that one because the sleeves drop down and the keyhole's a bit bigger and it's all a bit sloppier. And I wear that with a singlet underneath. But I thought, no, I think today I just need to have no extra layers. It's too warm for that. So Adira is this little top. She's a really good she's just a really nice little introduction to top down knits altogether. I think actually I haven't got a lot. There are a couple that require just a little bit more thinking, but most of my patterns are manageable. You can do them one step at a time. You can do them. And of course, if you really want to get to the nuts and bolts of it all, then you should join us over at Wardrobe Toolbox, because we really focus on getting a good fit and top down, with a focus on top down knitting. And so we talk all about you and your shape and taking measurements, and then moving into yarn and all of the modifications you can make. And there's so much to talk about. So we're over there doing that, wardrobetoolbox.com. Tamsin said, you got absorbed in work. And Claire said, just realised the time. Alex. Oh, actually, I'm going to go back up a little bit to the comments. Let's just have a look. Oh, Bernadette, you're going for a crafty retreat. A raincoat will be needed. It might be, actually. I don't think it'll last long, though, will it, this rain, if we get rain here. Tamsin said, absolutely, a very different way of knitting a sweater, but your patterns of great instructions are easy to follow, one stitch at a time. I agree, one stitch at a time. You think you're creating something in 3D, and it is a different way of thinking about it, apart from the fact you're working down, so everything seems upside down. So when you're knitting, it's just a weird way of knitting. And so when you're knitting, you've got like the neck down here, and then the rest of it up here. So you have to flip it upside down to see it. You just have to get your brain, it's good for your brain, I think, just to get your brain going in a different, literally a different direction to think about how things are put together. I think it must be good for us. Becky said she loves top down. It's so easy to try on as you go. And I have to say that is one of the really big benefits. Gay says she got a little tip for me. For cooling myself behind a desk, I stick my feet into a large bucket with cold water. Actually, I could do with that. I've already been for a swim today in the pool. It was cold. It was really nice. And don't forget to keep a towel handy. I know. I actually bought myself this tiny fan. I've got a big fan. It's really noisy. And Mr. Myrtle's rigged it up so that he's an engineer. And so he's rigged it up so that it points out the door and then it drags the hot air out or something like that. That actually works quite well, but it's quite noisy. I bought a little fan just from the warehouse. No, it might have 10 or something. Bunnings, somewhere like that. And it's just like that. It was cheapy. And I've put it next to my desk. And actually, that's actually quite nice. But I can't have it. I could have it here, but you'd hear a like that. And we can't be doing that. So I just sit here in the hot light, melting. Barbara said, I spoke to someone last week that said she was nervous about trying her first top down as she had looked ahead and the instructions seemed daunting. My advice was that if she can read and she knows how to knit and purl and do increases and decreases, she should be fine if she worked a stitch and row by row, one step at a time. I think so. I think that's exactly right. Don't overthink it. Don't go racing ahead. However, as we know from the stuff we talked about in Wardrobe Toolbox, when you do flip to the schematic page at the back of a pattern like this one, when you flip to this page and you know your measurements and you know the kind of ease, you know how baggy you like things to be, you can do a lot with this page before you begin, so you know where you're going to go with it. And once you've got those tricks in your head, like you do, Barbara, with Barbara puts an A-line shaping down here, and it just to create a great fit. And do you increase a little bit for the bust as well? I think you do, so that you've got a slightly bigger through the bust, and then you increase down the bottom, so it creates more shape where you want it. You can do a lot before you start, and you just bang that in to patterns, and you figure out, how am I going to get that in? And so you start to know the little tweaks that you make for you. Belinda said, I only just learned that standard bust sizing for sweater patterns is for a B cup or less. I think me, Nerdy Knitter, and others talk about measuring the upper bust and using bust shaping. What? Yes. Belinda, that's absolutely right. So the pattern is expecting, this will vary slightly, but often, and it will also vary slightly between sizes, but on average, the pattern is expecting that your upper bust measurement, so it's you measure above any boob flesh here. Some of us, like me, are kind of flat here. Other people have nice rounded boobs at the top. They're totally different shaped breasts. Anyway, if you measure above that under your arm, keep your shoulders nice and relaxed. And if you measure up there, the pattern is expecting that your full bust circumference around your full bust, bra dependent, remember, if you put on the bra, that it isn't, like my bra today could probably hoik me up a little bit, but it doesn't because it's real comfy. Anyway, your full bust circumference, they're expecting it to be about 2 inches or 5 centimeters bigger than your upper bust. I'm imagining a lot of you, that's not going to be the case. For some of you, it's going to be the same. And if you go down in the sizes, that can actually often be the case, that your upper bust and full bust can be the same if you have smaller boobs. So I think that's when you're getting into an A cup, if we're thinking about cup size, although even that can be so confusing. But as you move up through the sizes, and if you have a larger cup size, generally if you have a larger cup size, your difference is going to be a lot greater. So some of you, it'll be the same. Some of you, this will be a lot bigger, and occasionally you'll find that your upper bust is actually bigger than your full bust. And what that's telling you is about your shoulders. And so you want to think about this measurement up here, because it tells you, if you look at where my thumbs are, that there under my arm goes up. It's really hard to do it in a mirror, but it goes up to the top of my shoulder. It tells me about my shoulder width. It also tells me about my back, so my back width, and that will help me get a better fit through here, which is what we want first. We want it to fit here, and then this part, we can work that out later. So we start with measurement. So in fact, when I made a list of all the things, which it's in my head, the list is in my head. But when I made a list of all the things that I wanted to talk to you about today, when I thought about top-down knits, I thought, well, what do we actually need to tackle a top-down knit? And there are tools, but before we begin, we need to know our measurements. And to be honest, that doesn't matter whether it's top-down or bottom-up. It's really good to know, who are you knitting for? What is the size of the person you're knitting for in terms of measurements, and what is the shape of the person that you're knitting for, because that will help dictate the size you choose and the modifications that you make. So the 3 key measurements, I think I made something about 3 key measurements that you can grab. I'll have a look around and see if I can find it. If I have, I'll make sure it goes in my mini mag tomorrow. But the 3 key measurements that I think are super important, with a 4th just kind of tagged on the side, are this upper bust measurement, your full bust circumference, so across the part where you think your nipples should be, your bust apex should be. So again, that's dependent on your bra and how tightly you've pulled your straps and things. That one. And then your upper arm circumference, not waved out in the air, so you get all this bit underneath, down at your side and measured around your arm circumference. That's really important to know. And then as an aside, it can also be interesting to know, you've done your upper bust, but actually if you're doing particularly a set-in sleeve, or even a drop shoulder, you might also want to know what your cross back measurement is. And so it is really relating to that upper bust measurement, but it's from that little indent on one shoulder and the little indent on the other across the back. And if you are someone that has quite rounded shoulders, and that can happen just through age or sitting at our computers, if you're someone that rounds through the shoulders, you're going to find that can be a little bit rounded through here, and it might be a little bit broader. And although you might still choose a size that works with these, you might want to make modifications so that you have a bit more room through here. Otherwise, your back is going to eat up more fabric and your tops are going to start strangling you. That's why they're strangling you, because either the neckline isn't low enough for you, but often it's because that part of you here is eating up all the fabric, and so it's all going to the back. I have quite rounded shoulders, and so my necklines often want to roll to the back, so I'm hoiking them down quite often. I've just done a new pattern which is coming out on Monday for Wardrobe Toolbox, and I've really thought about a couple of things in that when it comes to fit. I enjoy this challenge of fit, and there's one little feature that I've done, knowing that your front chest width is typically narrower than your back. And so I've done a little bit of shaping through here to reduce a little bit of that width from your back so that it comes in at the front. I've done it before, done it differently in different patterns before, but if you reduce that width here so that you have a smaller width through here, you might find you get a better fit through the front. And you might be someone that has quite a concave, or particularly if you have very rounded shoulders, if you have more of a hump at the back of your neck and your shoulders are really rounded, this part here can get quite narrow, and you might be a candidate for someone that says, actually, I'm going to whack a whole lot of stitches off that part, so by the time I get to here it's much narrower, and then I'm going to add them on underneath. Okay, I'm really sorry to the people that are thinking they'd like to try their first top-down knit, because now I've just gone off into, Never Never Land, and I'm getting you all confused. So we're not going to talk about that anymore. But yes, going back to Belinda's comment, they are most sewing patterns and things. I mean, they'll tell you if they're not designed for a B cup, whatever that means. I mean, I this whole idea of cup sizes, that really drives me a bit bonkers, because a B cup in a 34 is different to a B cup in a 40. it's different. They're not the same. So I think just adjusting by cup size can be problematic. It's better if we look at these measurements, and if we look at the distance between the top of our shoulder and the bottom of our bust on the front and the back, and then we can add bust arts and shaping, and there's lots of stuff we can do to make a fabulous fit for us here down, whether it's our arms or our bust or our tummies or our bottoms or in our hips. There's so many things we can do. So but when you're just getting started, let's keep it simple. If you started with a pattern like this, there's a lot of bagginess in this. You can get away without doing crazy amounts of shaping in this, because it's designed, it's got a lot of design ease. And so that means not just ease to be comfortable, it's a naturally baggy garment. And so you don't have to be quite as fussy about what's happening in the pattern and the body and around here, because it's going to fit you, because it's designed to be quite baggy. So we're not going to worry about all that other stuff. But this is the stuff we talk about inside Wardrobe Toolbox. And it's really helpful for people that want to start making things that fit them properly, where they feel good and they've taken all that time and it fits them. Charlotte's advice. Okay, we've got some good advice coming here. Knit the sleeves first. It's so much easier without the weight of the body on the sweater. The sleeves first and then do the body length. That is one of my tips as well. So remind me, Charlotte, we'll come back to that. Lynn wants to know about less expensive yarn for my new top-down sweater. Look, Lynn, the world is literally your oyster. So you can either go for a single strand of yarn. You could make it in just a pure wool if you want. You'll probably find there's some really good pure wools out there that are a reasonable price. Or you could throw in a bit of mohair, and you don't have to use all this fangled new silky mohair. You don't have to use that. You could use some of the mohair like I've got over there that you get given by people from their stash in the 80s. You could use just fluff, and you could use mohair that has acrylic in it. You could use all sorts of things. You don't have to use what I say. One of the things we really focus on in Wardrobe Toolbox a lot is yarn. Yarn is so important because it doesn't really matter what I used. Like, in a way you could say, who cares what Libby used? I'm just going to use something I want to use. And what are we thinking about when we're choosing yarn? We're thinking about, what is the look I've gone for? It's soft. It's floaty. I suppose it's kind of floaty, but it's more like it ripples. It moves with me. But overall, it's that soft, cuddly look. Look at the folds in the fabric. Aren't they lovely? If you like that look and you don't want something too stiff, then you're going to want to focus on a gauge that gives you some movement in a yarn that is soft. And that's where you start. It doesn't even matter what it costs. So you start there and you think, okay, so maybe you want to use a bit of mohair. You could hunt around. You could pair it up with something that's a little bit cheaper, knit it up and see how it goes. You could ditch the mohair altogether. You might choose something that has a whack of alpaca in it if you want, so that you can think about using the alpaca to create some of those ripples and folds and softness. So please don't feel wedded to the yarn at all. The yarn is just a guide. I mean, if you want to use that yarn, fabulous. But think about what is the look you're going for. If you want to go for something that is much more structured, you won't choose yarn like I have. You won't choose yarn that ripples and folds like that. You might want to pull back some of the ease, because otherwise it's going to start looking pretty tenty. But you might decide just to go for a pure wool that has nice bounce and crispness. You'll get a lovely stitch definition through here, and it'll just take on the look of a totally different jumper. So I don't know. I love yarn. I love experimenting with yarn, but I feel like I'm really invested in you thinking, what do I actually want to wear? And then how do I get there with the yarn I choose? That's not a very quick answer, is it? But I'm not going to suggest specific yarns, I think. I've just got the one in the pattern, but I've told you the kind of features that I think this pattern has. And if you love that look of it in the picture, then you go for those. This is so soft. Look how it scrunches up in my hand. So it's got a reasonably, I'll put it this side, you can't hear me. It's got, you could open the gauge up a little bit to get some of the movement if the yarn itself wasn't particularly drapey. It's got a fabulous halo, but you don't need to use mohair to get that halo. You could use other yarns. It's got lovely ripple. Look at the way it ripples through there. It's got a bit of alpaca in this. And of course it's got the silk and the mohair. So if you want those looks, go for yarns that are going to lend towards that. I don't know if that's helpful. I hope it is. Again, you see, I'm talking too much for the people who are new to this. Oh, Ballarat, you're getting another week of under 20. I wouldn't be complaining either, Tanya. I'd be really happy about that. Gay says, my first top-down knit, the German short rows, were very foreign to me, and I didn't realise their purpose for shaping the shoulder. And when you understand the construction backwards, it really helps. Yes. Some of the little techniques can be a little bit daunting, I think. And so just take it one step at a time. And I use some short rows. See how the front is shorter than the back? That's because I've used short rows. So the rows are literally short. They start short and they get longer and longer. They're called lengthening short rows. So I start by knitting around a bit and then back, and then I've knit a little bit more and then back to the other side a little bit more, back to the other side a little bit more, like that, to do short rows. And that has the effect, you can see there, of raising the back neck and dropping the front neck and giving you a bit of a shoulder through here. We had an interesting call yesterday at Wardrobe Toolbox where we talked about shoulder shaping and yoke sweaters and how getting enough width through the shoulders for people that have very straight shoulders. It's really interesting. So though I use German short rows, I like them. They're not too tricky to understand. I think the key thing to remember is that they're like can-can dancers. That's what I always visualize. And so when you're moving your stitch across, you're going to lift that girl's skirt up. She's going to do it. So you're going to lift it up. She's going to show all her petticoats and her legs, toss it over her back, and then she's going to keep on going with all her moves. And that is the key to a German short row. She's got everything at the front and lift it back like that. If you can remember that, you won't forget how to do short rows. So, but it's just a little technique that's not too tricky to learn, and it's worth just spending a bit of time, look at a video and practice it and go through and learn it. You could sub it out if you want. You could throw in a short wrap and turn if you want. So you just take the stitch and you wrap your yarn around it and you move it back and you've wrapped your stitch. It's just so it doesn't make a hole at the end of your short row. But those are just a tiny little technique that you'll need when you're doing this knit. But you can learn that one. Is my new sweater featherweight or DK? It's not featherweight. It's equivalent to about a worsted weight or a DK. And but you could use a couple of mohairs, like a few mohairs held together if you want. It would make it super light and lovely, but it's equivalent. It's a 20 stitch gauge, so that, and the weight is around about a worsted. So but you can play with that to get that gauge and the lightness that you like. Have so much fun with it. Urchin is great for a first top down knit, says Alyssa. Yeah, that is a good one actually. It's a little summer top I've got, and I've also got one inside Wardrobe Toolbox called the Easy Breezy, and I've incorporated a few techniques in that are good to learn if you're just coming across a top down knit for the first time. I think that's a really good one for practicing modifications on as well. That one's only available in there. Sabrina said, I'm almost tempted to try knitting Baystone, the new one, in a DK cotton, as it could almost be like a sweatshirt for the summer. Okay, I would try it, Sabrina. And probably the thing about cotton is it's so jolly heavy. So you might want to dial back the ease, and you might want to play with the gauge so you don't end up with so much yarn in it. But I'd swatch it. Hang that swatch though to see how it behaves. But it might be fabulous to have a summery knit. I mean, you could pull back the gauge and tighten it up slightly, maybe, and then it would hold itself together. It would be interesting. You know, obviously you're going to tell me how you go with that. Michelle said, sleeves also affect how the sweater fits when trying on as you go. It makes the neckline sit better in my experience. Yes. So I'll go back to talking about what you need to do if you're a new knitter. Bendigo 4-ply classic and Bendigo lit are a great mix and cost. Yeah, there's so much good yarn out there that is actually really affordable. And a lot of the testers Claire's saying used affordable yarn. She used Skeins Heathers. So go over to the Ravelry page. I encourage my testers to post their projects on Ravelry so you can see what they used and then go back and have a little look. Knitting short rows make me think of watching an old printer arm laying down ink. Oh yeah, that's actually true. Yeah, with short rows like that, they get longer like that. That's good. It's easy to recognize them when you're reading your knitting with the German short rows. I agree, Gay. You don't miss those, do you? And Brenda says, I actually enjoy doing short rows. Well, German short rows. I'm still learning the others in Wardrobe Toolbox. Yeah, good. We've got a bunch in there. I've done tutorials for a whole bunch of them, so you can have a play. Oh my gosh, I'm so hot. Let me just cool myself down. It's that light, I think. It just makes me so hot. Okay, so I'm going to pretend. Let's think. We're someone who wants to knit this sweater, and we've never knitted a top-down sweater before. So what have we done first? We've taken our measurements, because that's really important. So I've got my measurements. I know my upper bust and my full bust, and I know my arm circumference. And I think I'm not going to go into detail about how to choose a size, because you can do that with knitting flat anyway, but just make sure you know who you're knitting for. Don't just go randomly dive into this. I don't want your first experience to be a disaster when you're trying this new technique of top down. So we've done that, and we've also swatched. Oh, shock, horror, the swatching. Who likes swatching? I actually quite like swatching. So the thing about this garment is it's knitted entirely in the round. Oh, I've only got one of my swatches here. It's knitted entirely in the round, and so that means you'll need to swatch in the round. Now what that means is you knit literally around and around and around. You have a tiny bit up here where you're knitting flat for the short rows, tiny bit, but don't worry about that. We're going to focus on where we knit around and around. There's no seams. And so you swatch in the round. This is going to be a little hurdle that you're going to get over before you even have to start. But it's a hurdle worth leaping, I think, getting over. So this is a swatch I did for this yarn just to see how it behaved. And you'll see I've cut it. So what I do to knit in the round is I cast all my stitches on, like with a long tail cast on. So I did it down this end. I actually cast on a long tail cast on. You could do any cast on you like. And then once they're on, I slid them all the way back to the beginning of my needle again. So they're on my stitches, on my needle, and then I slide them all the way back to the beginning again. And I grab my needle from the back and I go around and I knit again on the right side. I put my fan on. The big one is way too noisy, and the little one's over there. It's got a funny little attachment. I'll be fine. I'll cool down. I get hot, cool down, hot, cool down. I've got bare feet under here. So you keep sliding your work to the front of your needle, and what happens is you end up with a tube that looks a bit like this, with these pieces at the back are attached. They haven't been cut, because every time you slide your work back, you carry your yarn around the back and then you knit along again. And you just do that over and over. I didn't used to do this, but I quite like doing some twisted stitches and some purls at the edge because it holds everything firm. You don't have to do that, but it does hold the edges firm. And then when you've knitted enough, it's only knitting. You don't purl, right? You don't purl. You just keep knitting. So when you've knitted enough, you bind off. And then I love having this snipping the back. You don't have to do it this way. This is just my preference. I soak it first, and then I pull it out of the water, and this is all at the back like that. And I get my scissors, and I just go snip like that. Snip all those bits, and it all comes out flat. Give it a bit of a shake, and I squeeze it out a bit, and I lie it flat, and I let it dry, and I don't stretch it out. You can see I had a little practice of some of this stitching that I did around the yoke as well in here to see what I liked, and I haven't got my other swatches here. So but you can probably just get away with this for yours. You just want to know if you're confused about that stitch pattern, practice it. You can see what size your stitches are. Before you do this size swatch, you could do a swatch that big, and you could do it flat to see if you like the yarn. And if you like the yarn and you like what it's doing, then ditch that one and say, okay, great, this is looking good. I like this. This is looking really nice. And now I'm going to do a proper swatch, a big one, so I know how big my stitches are and how deep my rows are. And I cast on at least 40 stitches for that, because it gets me into a nice rhythm. And so more than 40 stitches when I include the ones at the end that I don't count. And then you get a decent size that you can measure, and it will give you a reasonably accurate gauge. You've got to be careful that you're still knitting with the same needles when you use your on your sweater, and you don't change needles, and you don't suddenly get really stressed out or super relaxed and change things in here. It'll give you a reasonable idea of the size of your stitches, and so that way you'll know how big your stitches are. Now, you're going to have to swatch. You should have been swatching, really, for even if you knitted flat, if you wanted things to actually turn out the size that you were planning. But you wouldn't have swatched in the round. This will be new to you, this idea of swatching in the round. So that's just a technique that you will learn. So we've got knitting, thinking about things from upside down. But first of all, before we start, we've got swatching in the round. And then we've got this idea of these crazy needles that have this bend in the middle. Now, I know there are some people that knit top down with long, straight needles. I don't know how they do that. It's admirable if you can have a go with it. But I love circular needles. And I have a pack of circular needles. Here's my circular needles. I like these Chiago ones. I have a grubby old pack that probably needs washing. I have all sorts of things stuck in it, like pins and safety pins on the front. It's very useful. I have zips and things. And inside, I always open it the wrong way. So I have to make sure I open it with the back facing me, because when I open it the other way, everything falls out. So inside my needle case is this. And these are the needles I hardly ever use because they're big and fat, really big and fat. This is the side I use all the time. And you can see how many stitches how many needles I have. And I've got a whole bunch that aren't in there at the moment. They're in use, particularly through here. 3.5s and 4s, those 3.75, 3.25, those needles I use a lot. And so I have multiple sizes of them. I love these packs. I have, this is an interchangeable pack. And so I have 5-inch tips and I have 4-inch tips. See if I can show you. And then I have, by accident, I ordered 3-inch tips. So I have all these tips, different lengths. How do I show you? It's really hard to hold them and show you. There we go. All these different lengths. Now, when you're starting, I think you should start with the longest ones, the 5 inches. I think it's easier for you if you've come from straights. I then moved to a 4-inch tip, which is actually my favorite. I love the 4-inch tips. I'm real speedy on them. But these weren't so bad. I actually didn't mind these in the end. When I ordered these by accident, I didn't mind them. So, well, you know, I don't think I'll change to those, but they weren't so bad. So I have all these needles and I can screw those on to my cables. And I keep all my cables in here. Actually, I've got a couple of packs of cables. I have cables for really fat needles. I accidentally ordered some of those that were too fat as well, so I seem to have a lot of those. And you've got to be careful you order the right thing or you end up like me with all these things. And then I've got other needles. Look, I've got skinny needles that I use for picking up stitches. I've got a higher needle in there. And then I have a whole lot of cables in different lengths all tucked in here. And so I have them from, I'll show you. I've got a whole lot on stuff at the moment, so I haven't got them all here. I've got them from reasonably short. Actually, is that one even shorter? Yeah, look, that's probably my shortest cable. And when I attach it on my needle, it's actually quite short. They're quite useful for swatching and things, those ones, or little tiny circumferences. Then they go a little bit longer. See, and you attach your needles to the end. Look at this one. Super long. Super long cables. And these can be really useful when you want to try things on. You can get little joiners as well, where you join the cables together. If you can imagine, that's a lovely big circumference. And you can go round and round. Now, to be honest, when I'm knitting, I prefer to squash all my stitches up on a small cable and race around it. I don't often use these really long cables for knitting. I mostly use them if I want to quickly put stitches on a holder, if I want to try something on and I haven't got time to put it on some yarn. I use them like that, and I will use, even that one's probably a bit longer than something I would use to knit on. This is still quite long. I would tend to use the ones that are not here, that are actually on my needles at the moment. And I think, what are they? Probably around about 30 to 50 centimeters long, I think. So I tend to use those mostly, and I just crunch all my needles up on those, and then when they feel a little bit like I've got too many stitches on the circular, I go to another size up, and so I do it like that. But you can do different things. So you can either do what I do and crunch everything up, and then go to bigger circulars or smaller circulars, or you could do something called magic loop, which is, I really don't like. I'm not a big fan of magic loop. Magic loop, you would use a really long cable, and you would split your stitches into two, and you would do half your stitches, and then you do the other half of your stitches, and you have this loop that hangs out the other end. I just find it all a bit like, feel like I'm constantly yanking my cable all the time, and I'd rather just knit around the circle. So you can have a play. I thoroughly recommend playing. I did not buy this set all in one go. I have collected this over 10 years or so, probably 10 years. I've collected this set of needles, one needle at a time and one cable at a time, or a number if I need a whole bunch. But I haven't bought them all in one go. You can buy sets. In this front pocket, I found these really helpful. In the front pocket, I keep lots and lots of things like this. Actually, I've got these little stoppers. I never use those. I don't bother. I just put a little light bulb safety pin. If I want to use a stopper, I either put a stopper on the end, a little rubber stopper, or I put a little safety pin through the hole in the needle here, and that stops the stitches falling off. But these are my friends. These things are my friends. It's not even the same brand. It's a little rubber pad, and I use that with a little, either a T-pin. You actually get special pins that you use for doing this, the key, but I've just used T-pins. They fit through the hole in my needle, and I put my little rubber pad on it, and it means I can tighten and untighten my needle really easily. So those are invaluable, because I find it, to get a really good tight grip and to undo them, I find that just absolutely invaluable. So those I highly recommend, something like that. And little pouches, because I don't know about you, Mr. Myrtle was looking at me the other day with my, I forgot my little pouch. He was looking at me the other day with my little pouch and all my needles, and I was fussing around and I was getting something, and he was like, "You're pretty anal, actually, with all that stuff." I said, "I'm just very organized. I like to know where all my things are, because it saves me so much time when I'm looking for things." I also have a little stitch gauge here, which is broken, and that's handy because now it fits into my pouch. It didn't fit in before. I took off the bit about measuring the gauge. You didn't need that. So, and I use that to see what size my needles are, because I can't read them for the life of me, especially if it's dark. So I just stick them through here to figure out what size they are when I need to use them. So these are essential tools, but you don't need this many in one go. I do recommend, if you are going to knit top down, get decent needles though. You don't want some crappy little needles that feel horrible to knit with. I think steer away from the old plastic ones and buy yourself a set, or buy yourself the needles you need for a particular knit when you need them. And a couple of cables. I find the interchangeables are really good. I think perhaps they're cost saving in the end. They could be. They've just been so useful. Tools of the trade. Now in this front pocket, I have one more pocket. I have needles that I use for sleeves. These are the safety pins I put through to stop the stitches falling off. This kind. The little light bulb kind. See? It's got that little ring that fits through beautifully, so it stops my stitches falling off. And I just have safety pins everywhere to help me with those sorts of things. Now in that front pocket, I have all these needles here, and what's that? Oh, that's another needle. I have all these, and I've collected these over the years, and I've actually got some that are still in packets, which is interesting. I must have accidentally bought more other needles as well, but I accidentally buy things. Look, I've got all these. These are not interchangeable. These are fixed circulars, but I use them for sleeves. They're little mini needles, and look how tiny and short they are. And I've got them in all different sizes. I have multiples of sizes I use a lot, because then I can put both sleeves on them, and I can get cracking with both my sleeves. Without having to go back and forth with things. And they and actually I felt quite proud of myself the other night, because I went to grab a needle, which is 3.5. I needed a 3.5 sleeve needle, and I felt around and I was like, I think that's a 3.5. That feels like a 3.5. And then I measured it, and it was a 3.5. And so I felt very proud of myself that I'm actually starting to know, after all these years, roughly know what size the needles are just by feel, which is amazing. Heather said you can use the magnifying on your phone. Yeah, I actually haven't. I can never manage that. I often don't know where my phone is, and B, by the time I try and find the camera, and I put it in a hole, or I say to someone, tell me what that says on there, and then they tell me. So I use these for sleeves. And they've got a handy little kink in them, which makes that crazy short needle more manageable. I did not use these at first. I actually used to use DPNs a lot, double pointed needles, down sleeves and small circumferences. I found that more comfortable. I did experiment with Magic Loop for quite a while. I didn't like it. So I ended up going to these, and these were a game changer for me for sleeves, because that fits a sleeve really well. They did take a little bit of getting used to. So my hands were just, whoa, what is happening here with this? This is so tiny and little, and my hands thought, this is weird. But it didn't take long before I was used to it. And once I have my stitches around here, I just go round and round and round and round and round and round and round. And usually you're only knitting. You're usually not purling. So it's a nice and easy to do. So I love the little sleeve needles. Now I'm only showing you Chiaogu because that's what I have. I do like higher as well. There are some Knit Pro ones I like. So you don't have to be like invested in just one brand. You can try different brands. Obviously you can try different brands. Experiment and just see. But if you just get them a little bit at a time, then slowly but surely you can develop a set of things you like. And so those are essential, I think, to your top-down knitting. You can try using straight needles if you want, but it's going to be pretty challenging to use straight needles. So those are my friends, and they just take a bit of getting used to. And you can knit with them flat, and you can knit with them in the round. So you don't actually need any other needles. So that's quite good. Knit Pro are great as they're color coded for sizes. I love that about Knit Pro. Although I heard the other day someone wrote to me and she said that she had some Knit Pro needles that when she measured them were absolutely not the right size they were supposed to be. So watch that for some of the bigger brands, I suppose, if they're knocking them out. Just check that your needles are the right size they're meant to be. Put them through that little measuring thing. I can see lots of questions here. I'm going to come back. What length cable are your sleeve needles and tip length? The tip length is about 3 inches, I would say. No, maybe it's 2. It might be a 2-inch tip, but it's got the kink in it, so 3 altogether, but they've kinked the top. That's what I'm yeah, that's a 2-inch. And then that's about 1 inch. So it's a kinked 3-inch tip. And I think that would be about 4, 6, I'd say, inches. I don't think I have anything I can measure that with, to be absolutely sure. But I don't think I've got a ruler on that anymore because I broke that bit off, the ruler on my stitch gauge. But it's just a little one. But they're called shorties. They're the only ones I think that have the little bend in them, I think. Let me know if they're not the only ones. But I really like them. If you find that you, when you go to those smaller circulars, that your gauge changes, you'll probably find it's going to go down, that you'll start knitting a bit more tightly, then go up a needle size for those. And actually that's a good point. When you're knitting in the round, you suddenly don't have to purl. And purl stitches can be quite baggy. And so when you get rid of the purl, all of a sudden Your knitting gets tighter because all your baggy pearls have gone. So watch that. That's why it's worth swatching flat and in the round if you are knitting something that has both in the pattern, because you might have totally different gauge knitted flat than in the round because of your pearls suddenly vanishing. All right, let's have a little look at your comments, and then I'll probably go on a little bit more. Here we go. Like swatching because it feeds the I've started a new project excitement. Yeah, good idea, Dee. That's a really good idea, because it does. You feel like, oh, I can get started. You can also swatch before you finish something else, so you're ready to go with the next thing. You don't have to like launch into it and then know that, oh, I've got so many whips sitting around. You can just swatch. Top down is the biggest advantage, is no visible seams and no sewing up at the end. I was sold on my first one. Good on you, Gay. I love it too. Am I freezing? Oh, hopefully I'm okay now. Barbara says, I love swatching. And so does Dee. Is the technique of twisted edge stitches in Wardrobe Toolbox? Yes, it is. But it probably is in Swatching Like a Pro, I think. Dee, have a look in that lesson. It'll be in a swatching lesson. Maybe Claire will remember. We'll put a link in the email. Or maybe we'll put a link in the lounge. Maybe someone could pop a link in the lounge to anything that shows us about how to do that, what to do for the swatching in the round and swatching, doing the twisted edges. Barbara says, I don't cut my swatch. It could be that extra bit of yarn you think you need if you could be playing yarn chicken. Barbara, that is actually right. So it could be that extra bit of yarn that you need. And I play a bit free and loose because I tend to try and get a little bit more yarn that I need, but I don't always. But if you don't want to cut your swatch, you can either make your loops longer at the back so that it will still lie flat and have the loop at the back, or you could do a swatch knitted with the loop all out on one side, and so it's a little cumbersome. You have to make sure you've got enough yarn, but essentially you pull your yarn out and then you start at the other end and knit back, so that when you get to the end of the round, you've used all the yarn from that loop. I have got a tutorial about how to do that inside Wardrobe Toolbox, and that way you don't have to cut it. But I try and get just a tiny bit more yarn. It can be really difficult, of course, if you're stash diving, because there'd be no possibility to getting anything more. But if you can, then that would be good. Becky says, I love swatching. Finding the right fabric is such a buzz. That's the point of it, isn't it, Becky? And so that's the thing. That is the lovely thing, is we're after fabric that we want. And so when we go back to the question that was asked earlier about yarn ideas, almost your guess is as good as mine, because I want you to find fabric that you love. And I've told you about the features of this pattern that we're looking for. If you like the look of that, the folds in the fabric, the way it drapes beautifully, the softness of it, those are all features in the fabric that you can try and get out of your swatch. My testers are never lucky to see the photos. They never get to see the photos. So they just have to take a running leap at it. And so a lot of them have got experience now of knowing kind of, okay, well, this has got quite a bit of ease in it, and this is the kind of jumper it is, and so this is the sort of feel I want out of it. And so they use that knowledge that they've acquired, they've learned, to decide what yarn to choose. And you can get all sorts of different things. Yes, says Terry, mine looks very similar to that. Yeah, exactly, that beautiful one that you did, Terry, that cream one. So nice. It was almost white, isn't it? Tamsin said, it often requires knit maths as the gauge does not match the fabric I like. Yeah, so there is that too. So we're not going to tell the people who are just starting new that just at the second. We're going to tell them that you do your swatching and you figure out your size, and then if you have any questions and you can't get gauge and you're fiddling around with the needles, you come and talk to us about it, about what to do next. Come over to the Hangout, join Wardrobe Toolbox, and we'll show you what to do for the next stage. So what have we got so far? We've got our swatching, we know our measurements, and we've got our tools. What other tools do we need? It's really good, and you won't have used these probably much, if at all, inside in a seamed garment. You might have used them a bit, but maybe not. To have stitch markers, and I love just simple little ring stitch markers like these. I really like these. colourful ones so they stand out. Some people like dangly ones. Look, you can get all sorts of stitch markers. And you can also get removable stitch markers, and I just was doing something yesterday with removable stitch markers because they can help indicate where buttonholes are going to go. And like I often get you to put a marker at the top of a shoulder so that you pop your marker in the work and you know that's the top of the shoulder, and then when you can measure from there down to see how deep the armhole is going. So these little removable markers, I've got little Knit Pro plastic ones, are great. You can also use these. I've got a whole tin of things here. This is my making tutorials tin. It sits on my table, and I use these ones. These are great little removable stitch markers too, and they come free when you buy something at the shop. Those little safety pins, they are fantastic. And you also could do with, you can sometimes use dangly ones if you want. I don't tend to use dangly ones very often unless I'm knitting lace or brioche or something like that. And then you also want your yarn needle for occasionally, because occasionally you'll want to seam something, or you'll want it to weave away your ends mostly. Occasionally you'll want it to seam, not very often when you're knitting top down. What else do you need in terms of tools? You'll definitely need tape measure. And if you want, you can grab a row counter, but you don't need that. Pencil and paper, it works quite well. You don't actually need a lot of stuff to knit a top-down garment. You can make do with things that are around you. If you don't have stitch markers, use little loops of yarn. Make tiny loops and use those. If you don't have those silicone cords to put things on, to try things on, use a piece of yarn. I actually prefer that anyway. If you don't have, those bought stitch markers, use those little safety pins. You could use these for all of your stitch markers. Look, I've got a paper clip in here, but you could use those for all your stitch markers. You don't need anything fancy at all. So I think you're ready to get started now with your top down knit. Let's just read your comments. I just did that. I started on a 5-inch. I'm now moving to a 4. I really don't like anything smaller. My goal is to have that many needles and cables. Yeah, I didn't think I would like anything smaller, and I accidentally ordered 3-inch tips in number 4s. I needed some 4 mils, and so I ordered them, and I was like, oh, how did I order 3-inch tips? I don't know, but I needed them, so I used them, and I thought, oh, these actually aren't as bad as I thought, because I've slowly graduated down. I haven't leapt from long needles to that. I haven't done that. And I've talked to you before about my sock needles, where I have one long one, one short one. That works as well. If possible, I would recommend buying a set to start out, as I probably spent double the price buying individual needles and cables over time. Gail, that might be, that's true. If you can afford to splash out and buy a big set, you can. I just find with the sets, I don't use a whole bunch of those needles, and so I've ended up buying lots of the needles I do use, and then I've got needles there that I've bought once or twice for things. But you can see, if I look at my kit here, if this came as a kit, I just don't need any at that side. I don't use that side. So think about what you're going to knit. If you're going to buy a kit, are you mostly knitting smaller, finer yarn, or thicker yarn, or somewhere in the middle? And then decide a kit that suits that, because some kits will have small needles and some kits will have fat needles, and some will have a mixture of the two. So you know what to do. You're good shoppers, so you could do that. Would I use the longer ones for shawls? Would I use the longer ones for shawls? I think I do, because sometimes you have like 500 stitches. And I could do, but I still don't want to be sitting there yanking the cable through so I can get my stitches up to the end. Come on. I say, come on, get all those stitches up to the end of my needle. Yank. I still don't really like doing that. So I think my sweet spot is probably a cable about that long. And what's that? That's probably about 50 centimeters. 50 to 80. I'd say 50, even 30 to 50. I think that's my sweet spot for that size cable. I put long cables in my pattern suggestions, because if you want to spread them out, you need some room. But yes, you can knit faster. As Sabrina is saying, I'm currently knitting Noah and staying at a shorter cable. It does help with faster knitting in the round. Yeah, I just race around. The only thing to watch with that is that you don't get too tight, which I can do sometimes if I'm going real fast. Around, I can like that. Everything can get tighter, or conversely, it can get really loose because I'm just going so, I don't know, I can do it either way. Tamsin said, I really like knitting with Chiaogu needles, 35 centimeters to 125 centimeter length cables. So you've got a nice variety. The cables aren't terribly expensive, so you can get, and you'll need a lot. You'll need a lot of cables. You can just get away with a few tips, but cables, oh my gosh. Because if you have a project and you decide, I'm going to put that down for a minute, I'm going to do something else, you can take the needles off, but you leave it on the cables. And then you're like, where are those cables? Why have I suddenly got no cables? Because they're all on all the other projects or on the various parts of the body. So, for example, when I'm knitting this one, and I'm going from the top, I start on a cable here. Actually, I'll talk you through how this is made in a second too. Have I got any time? I've got 3 minutes. I start at the top, and then by the time I get to here, I've got all these stitches for the top of the arms all the way around the body, all on my cable. And then I have to take my sleeves off on both sides, and so I get a shorter cable, probably about that long, because I like to be able to try things on. So I don't put it on my tiny cable at that point. I put it on a longer cable, and then I put my safety pin through both holes. And so essentially what I do, pretend this is a longer cable, I put my stitches on, I put my safety pin through both holes, and I just leave it like that, and then without the needle tips on it, and then I have one on each side, and then I go to my body and I knit about 2 inches of the body, and then I can try everything on. And I can also do that when I come back and pick up the sleeve. I can do a little bit of the sleeve here, and then I can slip it onto a slightly longer cable with my safety pin in, and I can try it on again and see how it all feels. But when you do the sleeves first, it picks up the underarm. I also like doing the neck, and it pulls everything in, so you get a good sense of how things are fitting. But lots of cables are really handy. You could use waste yarn, of course, and just slip things onto yarn, but I love the ease of slide it onto a cable, knit it off the cable, knit it onto the cable. It saves me a bit of time, and time is something I'm short of, so any time saving things I like. And it's really tidy. It all looks tidy when I'm doing it too. I don't look like I've got this old jumble of yarn. It's all really tidy, which makes me feel more enthusiastic about it if it's not looking like a jumble. I add to my set with extra tips and cables. I've got a massive collection now, Kim. I think they're tools. They're your tools, and so it's really important that you get needles that have tips that you like. I love these Chiaogu tips because they're quite pointy. I do stab myself in the finger. I have a pretty deformed finger up here now where I've stabbed myself so many times, but I like that sharp tip. You can get blunter tips if you like. It'll depend. You'll figure out what you like depending on what you're knitting too. And of course there's wooden tips, and there's metal tips, and there's carbon tips, and there's all sorts of different tips, and it's worth experimenting. Kim said, I cut up a jar gripper, and now I've got several of them in my notions bag. Oh, excellent, for the little rubber thing. Yeah, it's really good. I think I got that one for free. Gay said, I also watched a tutorial about putting a lifeline in your knitting, and you can thread through the hole of where your cable joins. Yeah, I've got one like that in Wardrobe Toolbox as well, Gay. And it is that you can thread through that little hole there, and then it will just, as you're knitting, you're going to put that lifeline in. It's really handy. The other thing you can use for a gripper is those rubber type shelf liners. They come in rolls. I cut off what I need for opening jars and tightening needles. Gosh, that's a really good idea, Brindis. I like that idea for opening jars. That's a really good idea. The sleeve needles are great for socks. I knit socks on 2 needles. Oh, Deirdre, that is a good idea actually, if you get fine ones. Yeah, that's really good. A 16 centimeter cable is a 6 mil tip and 11.5. I'm not sure. I've lost you now, Tamsin. I'm sure you were telling me something really helpful and I've lost you. Polly says she loves those shorties with the bend in them. Yes, Mary Ruth's going to use the tip to use the light bulb stitch markers to keep your stitches from falling off your needles. It worked great on my sock knitting. I knit on 9-inch circular needles. Oh, you're brave, Mary Ruth. Yeah, oh, and you needed your swatch last night to finish a hem, Barbara. Yeah, look, it does pay to keep a little bit of yarn if you can. And so if you can do it, I guess if you're worried about having not enough yarn, maybe don't snip it. I use a dangly one to indicate the beginning of round. That way it's more obvious. Now, when we're knitting something like this, we grab a marker, which we call our BOR, beginning of round marker. And then we know that's the beginning of the round, because what we're doing is we're just creating these, it's helical really. And so we're creating a spiral of stitches as we go around. And we always get back to a place where we're starting the next round, but it's just going to be slightly lower than the round before. And we mark that with a marker. And I think it's a fantastic idea to have a specific marker in your pattern, in your work, and it can vary from project to project, that you know is your beginning of round marker. Because sometimes if you're knitting a garment like this, you'll have a marker under that, on that side, which is your beginning of round. And you'll also have a marker on this side to indicate where you might want to do shaping or have a faux seam or something like that. And you could get those two confused. Remember that you're usually going to be working across the front first, but nevertheless you can get them confused. And I find it can be helpful to use color-coded markers. And for things like, I like to have I can remember things better when I create a little story around it. So for example, if I have these little circular markers like these two, I could use the green marker, because green for go, as my side seam marker, and I could use my pink marker or red marker for stop. That's my beginning of round. Okay, so I could put that, and in my head I'm like, okay, green for go, red for stop, and I just can have those ideas in my head as I'm going around. So it is a good idea to have a variety of different markers. The other reason it's a good idea to have a variety of markers is because you won't believe how many markers you will lose. Hundreds and hundreds of markers you will lose over the years. I don't know where they all are. All of the markers. So many markers. I have had, over the years, I've had favourite markers. I haven't got any of those anymore. Don't know where they are. Beautiful little hand-blown glass markers. Gone. Silver markers. Gone. I don't... They just disappear. I think they get sucked up in the vacuum cleaner. They slide down the side of the couch. They're under the bed. I have no idea where they all are. They just jump off and go other places. So you need a lot of markers. That's a good thing to grab if you're going to get something. Great Christmas treat, markers. So Gay uses a dangly one at her beginning of round, and that way she just knows that's her that's her beginning of round. Michelle uses removable stitch markers as row counters. That's a good idea too, especially down sleeves when you're doing decreases down sleeves. Now I thoroughly recommend that you learn how to read your knitting, and so you could look at a sleeve. This one has no decreases. I'll just tell you that now. There are no decreases down this sleeve, but if it did and it slowly decreased, it's nice to be able to read your knitting, so you can just say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, however many I've done. But you could, every time you do one, put in one of those little removable stitch markers, one of these little guys, like this. You could just pop one in, and then you can count them, and you know that, oh yeah, I've done my 7 decreases there, and now I'm going to do my 6 at a different rate here, or whatever. So that's a good thing to, that's a really good thing to do. How do I join my new ball in the round? There's 2 things there. One is, how do I join in the round? I don't really. I just get my stitch from my last stitch and my first stitch, and I put them together. And you want to work at the front of your work, not the back at your work, you knit inside out. Bring it to the front of your work, and I just knit them, and I keep things nice and tight. And you can knit with the tail and the working yarn for the first couple of stitches. That'll tighten things up. You could do where you knit 2 together. You cast on an extra stitch and then you knit 2 together, and that will join them together. You can do this fangled thing where you move stitches back and forth and lift them over and drop them. Beautiful way of joining in the round. I don't do any of that. I just get my stitches. I make sure they're not twisted. Otherwise I'm joining with a twist. Make sure they're all lying beautifully around my needle, which is another reason I quite like my short needle, because I can see them. And then I join them in the round by just knitting the next one and giving it a yank. And next time I come around to it, yank. And I usually know that I'm going to be able to clean it up later if I need to. For something like this, you start under the neck band. So it's not really essential that you have this beautiful clean join in the round. If you were starting up here at the top, you might want to think about something that's tidy. But you can always tidy things up with your tail in the end. a tail is amazing for tidying things up. So leave yourself a good tail. If you're finding that you're joining in the round and you keep twisting your stitches, and so that you don't even notice it at first, and so you've joined in the round, and then you come to the next round and you're like, oh, it's all twisted. You can correct it on the next round, but if you've done a few too many and you're like, oh my gosh, I've created this helical knitting where it's like that, it's not like that, then that is a pain in the neck. It's not going to work. So one trick you could do is you could knit a couple of rows if you're not doing increases or short rows or things like that. You could knit a couple of rows. This is a great idea for socks, top down. Knit a few rows and then join it in the round, and you'll find that you won't have the twist. But if you're very careful and you have them on a needle and you can see them all, and you just go through and you make sure they're all lying correctly, and then you join, then you can eliminate having that twist. I'm going to touch wood now, but it's been years since I've had a twist joining in the round to touch all the wood, because I'll probably do it next time. But yes, you there's a couple of things you can do, but don't overthink it. You can keep things quite nice and simple. We want things to be nice and easy. Sabrina says a crochet hook is handy for picking up a drop stitch or a split yarn stitch. Good idea. A crochet hook is a nice thing to have, especially a nice little sharp one with a good points. You can pick things up. When I'm joining a new ball of yarn, I tell you what, lately I've knitted a few things with non-superwash yarn, and oh hallelujah, I do love that, because then when I'm joining a new skein, I just spit splice it. And so what I do is I rip my end. I've showed you this before, but this is such an excellent thing to do. I sometimes will do a Russian join if I'm doing something that I can't do this for, or I'll just knit a couple of stitches together and deal with the tails later. But if you want to join a new yarn, so what you do, if it's not superwash, this is yarn and not plant fiber, this is feltable yarn that can felt. I break it. This can be hard. So you have two broken ends, okay? That's what I start with. And then I undo the plies, assuming it's got plies. I actually did this for the mohair as well. I did it for the mohair. I didn't just do it for the body of yarn in that one. I undo the plies. This one has got 4 plies in it. And I go like this. I just love this. It just eliminates all the ends. Well, not all the ends, but a lot of the ends. So I've got 4 plies in that. And what I do is I break 2 of them off. And I just leave 2. And I do the same on the other side. And so I undo it. And you want a reasonable length. And I break 2 of them off. And if you've got 3, you can do 1 on one side and 2 on the other, or, you know, so on. And you need to break them. Otherwise, it doesn't work as well. So you break them. So you've got 2 on one side, 2 on the other. Whatever number you have, it equals in total the number of plies in your yarn. And you just suck them, trying to get too wet. Try not to get too wet in your woolly in your mouth. And you can just pop them in your hand like this. In your hand. So they overlap. Okay, these 2 ends. And then you rub them. Oops, it can be a bit tricky to do. You can do it on your knee. But I do it in my hand like this. And I rub them. And yes, you can use spit. If you don't want to use spit, you can just dip your fingers in some water. But you want some wet and you want some friction. And you want to give them a good roll. Pretty soon you'll not really realize where it is. You'll not notice where it is. And you create, look at that. It's fantastic. Oh, it did break. If you pull it hard enough, you break. If you do create a lot of friction and a lot of water, it will not break. It will be fantastic. So spend a little bit of time doing that. But that's how I join my yarn. And I love, love, love doing it to get rid of my ends. If I can't do that, I'll do a Russian join. So I'll get my ends like that. This is great for plant fibers, and I wind that end back into the yarn, and I wind that end back into the yarn so it's nice and tight. And the other thing I do is I just get my new yarn and I knit about 3-4 stitches together with my old yarn. I try and hide it underneath here somewhere. I don't do it in the middle of a row, and I hide it on the edge, and I just knit a few together, and then I let the old one drop and I carry on with the new one, and I come back later and I weave them away. So that's how I join my yarn. Yes, Charlotte says she's got different needles with the same cables, Knit Pro ranges, and I use cable connector to try things on. Because you can just join long cables. It's a good idea. Get a few cable joiners. That's a good point. So you get these little... I used to have a cable joiner that was on my... It was here. It was on one of my safety pins, and it's not there. It must be in one of my pouch now, that you can join the cables together. A green safety pin marker is always my BO beginning of round. Green for go. Yeah, so I think it's good. I think it's good to have that little story in your head about something. I think of those things all the time to help me remember things. And so Natasha's beginning of round is the red one as well. So she's like, stop, this is the beginning of the round. And you can get light bulb safety markers cheap at the $2 shop. Oh, there we go. That's a great thing. So you don't have to spend a lot of money. Maybe your needles will be the most expensive, and then your yarn, that's pretty expensive. And Polly, oh, that's a lovely idea, Polly. She said she loves finding stitch markers when she's traveling, and then she has a little fun reminders of trips while she's knitting. Oh, that's a good idea. Lynn said, I still do a spit splice with superwash, but I overlap a longer section. It takes more rubbing, but it still works. Oh, that is so good, Lynn. I haven't actually tried it in superwash, so I will now. That's excellent to know. And cable joiners are too easy to lose. Those and stitch markers, right? They just disappear. So where are we with our pattern? Do we feel a little bit more confident? Maybe not. Maybe I've totally freaked you out. But you absolutely can do it. You're going to start up here, and you're going to take it step by step. You're going to make sure you've done the things that are going to set you up to get a knit that's going to fit you, so you don't feel totally disappointed, right? You've got yarn that you think will create a fabric you like. You've tried it out in your swatch. You've measured yourself. You know what you measure. You've had to think about how baggy you like your clothing to be, and you've thought about what size to make with that in mind. You've got your tools that you need, and you've cast on, and for something like this, you're casting on all together and then joining in the round. And so we're going to cast on. I'm just going to remind myself what I do. I've cast on, and I actually used a cable cast on for this one. I quite like that firm edge for that. And then I join it in the round, and I tell you the beginning of the round is the center of the right shoulder. I've given you this kind of information so you can start thinking about it as you're going. And then I'm actually going to launch you straight into an increase. And so once you've joined in the round, that's why this is a good one to actually make sure your stitches aren't twisted, because the next row you're going to do is an increase row, and you're going to do an increase all the way around here so that it suddenly flares out, and you're going to create, the top of this is a circle. That's what you're actually making with this jersey. You're making a circle, and you're going to do the increase round, and then you're going to start doing some short rows so you don't work. You can see some of the rows, I've worked more rows at the back than I have at the front because they stop before they get to totally at the front. And then you do another increase row, and you can see the circles get bigger and bigger and bigger, and you haven't done anything fancy yet. It's all pretty easy so far. You're doing this fun little stitching, and you're increasing in between, and you're still getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Look, we've got a big circle before we think about doing anything else. Your neckband isn't on at this stage, right? Is this the longest ever podcast? Maybe it's an hour, about an hour, a quarter. Oh, shocking. Anyway, I want to quickly say this for my new people that want to have a go. So when we've done that, and we get, this is the whole yoke section that's done, and it looks like a giant circle when you hold it out. So we've got our giant circle, and at that point we say, okay, now we're going to split our sleeves from the body. And so we're going to take our sleeve stitches, and I walk you through how to do it, and you just follow it step by step by step. And you'll need your cables, your extra cables, or your yarn to put your sleeves onto, and you'll need your stitch marker. You're already using a stitch marker, but you'll need to move that into another place, and then you'll go into the next section. And by the time you're in the next section, those sleeves are split off, and you're just working on the body section. And I like to work a couple of inches on the body and then put it on a holder and then come back to the sleeves. And I pick up a sleeve and I do a couple of inches, and I pick up the other sleeve and I do a couple of inches, and then I try it on. And I love doing that because then I can get a sense of, is it fitting me well at that point? If you want, you could then, I was suggesting this to my daughter the other day, she was like, I'm not doing it. It's not how it's written in the pattern. That's totally out of order. I said, you could now do the neck if you want. I would do the neck, because then you can pick up the neck and you could knit the neck, and then when you try it on, you'll say, is this feeling good or not? And you can, work out if you like the neck the way it is. You could have a play with the neck. If your yoke is deep enough for you, all of those things, you get a sense of that. And once you've got to that stage and your neck is in and your sleeves are separated and you've knitted a bit and your body's done and you've knitted a bit, you're home and hosed. If it's working, then it's worked. This is the biggest part to do. And if this works, boom, you've done it. You've made it. And so now what you need to do is you just go back. I would do one sleeve. You pull it in at the bottom, you do your cuff, and you can keep trying it on. You could do a bit of one sleeve, go back and do a bit of the other sleeve, do a bit of one sleeve, try it on, think, are these sleeves the length I like? How long do I want these sleeves? No shaping to think about. You're just going to knit straight, and then when you make them the length you want, or less the cuff, don't forget you got a cuff on the bottom, then you think, okay, cool, I'll start doing my shaping at the bottom, and I'll add my cuff, and that sleeve is done, and I'll do the other sleeve, and then you've got these two sleeves done and this tiny little jumper up to here, and then you go back and you do the body. Where would I recommend a lifeline? I think, Gay, you could do lifelines as often as you like through the yoke, and you might want to do one at the top of the arms once you've knitted a little bit and through the body. But to be honest, if you put them through the yoke and then you get and do them nice and soft so they don't affect the way it fits. But once you've got to here and you've tried it on, and if it's working, you won't need it anymore. I mean, you can keep them in. You could put another one in, so if you make a big boo-boo, you can go back and fix it and get back to this part here. But I just dot them through the yoke. You might want to pop them in every time you do an increase and you know your stitch count is correct. Maybe put a lifeline in and then do the next section. And then do your increase, make sure your stitch count is correct, you resolve it, and then put a lifeline in. You could do that. And then if you balls up any of these down here, you can go back and you know your stitches are right at that point. I'm not going to talk a lot about mods today because I think this is a jumper that you can make nice and sloppy, and I don't think you've got to get too panicky about fitting you. The one thing you might like to do is you might like to add a bit of shaping in the body to bring it out a little bit. But honestly, if you've got this far and it's working and then you want to do some changes, just come and talk to us and we'll tell you about how to do the changes underneath. It's not very tricky, and you'll be feeling so good by then because you're like, this thing is actually working and it feels good, that you'll be enthusiastically trying something like changes. So those are the things. It's really the fit between the shoulder and the arm that's important. 100%. This is what's important. Now this one is quite a deep yoke, so you're going to find that it's not going to be too small probably. If anything, it might be longish. But then for this jumper, because it's got so much ease in it and it's quite baggy, you want it to be a bit long, because the whole idea is it's sloppy and it fits over things. So from that respect, it's actually not a bad one to have a bash at, because you can get away with having it a bit baggy. But make sure you choose the right size to start with. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a big neck, a massive yoke, huge arms, and a body that's too big for you, right? So make sure you go back, and if you're confused about what size to choose, please come and talk to us over in the Hangout. You can email hello@trulymyrtle.com and we'll help you out. But I want you to choose the right size. There are 7 sizes in this pattern. There's quite a bit of room for movement, but it's a good idea not to choose something too big. Most people choose something too big. Don't do that. Choose something that actually fits you and gives you a nice fit through here. So I'm hoping you feel a little bit more confident. That was really long, and so I'll wrap it up now, because that was a very long podcast. But it's been so nice to chat to you all, and I'm hoping, I'm really enthusiastic about top-down knits. I really do want to do some seamed stuff, but I love top-down knits. I know that you do too, because you keep telling me, I say, oh, maybe I'll do a seamed thing, and you're like, no, don't do a seamed thing. And Wardrobe Toolboxes, I've got a new pattern. I'm looking at it over there. I'm looking forward to giving you that on Monday. It's a new garment. It's quite different to this one, totally different. And I'm working on something else at the moment. I've got so many plans, not enough hands. But yeah, I'm really keen on top down. I like the whole, once your head wraps around going from the top down, you keep turning it up the other way to look at it. Just remember, turn it up the other way to look at it. Don't look at it like that and think you know what's happening. Turn it up the right way, and your needles will be at the bottom, and inspect it and steam it as you go and try it on, things like that. All right, everybody, I will see you later. I can see some lovely thumbs up coming. If you fancy giving me a thumbs up, I always like seeing the thumbs up. Oh, great. It was good. Good, Gay. I'm looking forward to seeing your jumper. Be so fun. I have a really happy week. I will see you next week. We're creeping towards the end of the year now, aren't we? It's really getting close. I've got to do some Christmas planning and shopping and organising, but school hasn't quite finished yet. I've got one girl still at school, so yeah. All right. I'm going to see you soon. Have a happy week and do heaps of knitting. Bye, everybody. See you later.